Alright, I've been building a rear-wheel drive Ford Zetec motor. First question, I guess, is why build a rear-wheel drive Zetec motor? Well, one thing, I needed the exhaust on the driver's side of the motor for my project and the intake on the other side. I wanted something small, around 2 liters, 1.8 to maybe 2.3 or something. And the Zetec fit the bill. It's real easy to find in a junkyard, which was another major factor. You have a Mazda BP motor I could have used, but it's hard finding Miatas in junkyards without thrashed motors. They came in, Zetecs normally came in a Focus. They came in a bunch of other cars. The Zetec variant with the variable timing on the intake camshaft, which actually this motor has some parts from that on there. I'll show you here in a minute. So I have what I tried to do is use as many junkyard parts as possible because that's cheap. So what this here is the factory exhaust manifold cut off, and I welded on this get up there to use on my conversion. Another thing about using these is they have been successfully used in rear-wheel drive conversions, so we know that they work. So this particular motor has everything from the factory AC, because I like to stay cold, the power steering pump. The only new component is the alternator. Everything else was on the motor when it came from the junkyard. These, if you're not going to use these, which I probably aren't, they just come right out. That's the factory mounting bolts. So let's see some of the details of this motor here. The motor was rebuilt. It's a good thing to rebuild junkyard motors, only because you don't know the condition. This one had about 140,000 miles on it when I purchased it. When I rebuilt it, everything looked great. There was no major issues. Honed the cylinders just to clean them up. New camshaft bearings. No, sorry, not camshaft bearings. New crankshaft bearings. New rod bearings. ARP rods. Connecting rod bolts, because ARP connecting rod bolts, because I want to last a little longer. The only aftermarket thing I really did to the motor itself was I ported the heads a little bit. Nothing huge, just a little porting to open them up, and then some comp cams. Now the only complaint I had about the comp cams is there's a sensor here that picks up the timing of the camshaft, so you could use sequential ignition. But this sensor here actually hit on the cam. There's a small little metal rod that it passes by, the magnetic sensor, and that rod on the comp cam's camshaft will hit that sensor. You're going to need to remove that sensor. I mean, not remove the sensor. You're going to need to grind that down to get it to fit in this car. When going to rear-wheel drive, you obviously can't use the factory transmission, number one. So this here is a 2002 Mustang V6 transmission, the T5 off of a 2002 V6 Mustang. This is a quad 4 rods bell housing. The only major complaint I have is it doesn't come equipped with any kind of clutch setup. So inside I have a ram clutch, hydraulic throwout bearing. Another thing with the rear-wheel drive conversion for these cars is the pilot bearing. There's no pilot bearing. If you're going to use this setup, there's no pilot bearing on a normal factory Zetec. So just go to like bearingsdirect.com and purchase a, I think, 17mm by 21mm cage type bearing. It's a typical pilot bearing they use in a regular car. Just grease it up, stick it in the crankshaft, and away you go. It uses the factory flywheel and factory pressure plate right now. but it's using a, I think, 9.25, don't quote me on that number, clutch for a 4-cylinder turbo Mustang. That, once again, is a ram clutch. So ram clutch, hydraulic throwout bearing, and a ram disc for the actual clutch in there. Everything else is pretty much factory. So when you're going rear-wheel drive, it's important to have, particularly for my motor, I mean, obviously your motor setup might be different depending on your vehicle. You might need the front sump depending on your car. I need the rear sump. So the factory motor comes with a front pump on the normal Zetec out of a Ford Focus. This, I think, is a Mercury Mondeo. I think a Mondeo. Anyways, it's whatever the VCT Zetec motor is with the variable cam on the intake. It's from a Mercury. That's all you need to know. Just look around in the junkyard, you'll find them. Thing I noticed about going rear-wheel drive with the 2002 V6 transmission from a Mustang. This is an electronic speedometer pickup. The other thing is your input shaft. From the V6 Mustang is too long, so you're going to have to purchase the input shaft to a 93 GT Mustang or 4-cylinder Mustang or whatever it is that you're looking to do, but you need the shorter input shaft length for the T5 to work. Now, I tried to get the transmission from a 5-liter Mustang from the late 80s or 90s, but it was proving hard to find a manual one in the junkyard from the older vehicles. The V6 Mustang was left and right, and you'll find them everywhere, so I had my pick of the litter on those. It appears to, obviously I've never driven it yet, but it appears to shift fine, and the motor turns over good, and these are some of the things that you're looking for at the junkyard. You want to make sure be careful at the junkyard when you want to go to turn it over. The pistons could be stuck, and the last thing you want to do is break a ring trying to free it. So if you're having some problems and it's really hard to turn over at the junkyard, just unplug some of the spark plugs, just spray some WD-40 in them, and then try to turn it. It's got all new seals, lap the valves, new rings, so she looks like she's ready to go. Some other, I guess, important things that some people might want to know about. So if I can do this here, the length, some of the links on this motor here. So I can get this to stay out. Yeah. Here we go. So from the tip of the motor, we'll say right there, to the end of that, looking right about 23 centimeters for the lengthwise on the motor itself. Transmission will go from the beginning of this transmission beginning of the transmission to the end of the transmission. It's about 32 inches. So, and this is about 3 inches. So, total length of the motor is 32 plus 20 is 52 inches from there to there. If you want if you're doing something weird and you're not using that, and alright, so how wide is this with all the accessories on there? So right about there is the edge of that motor to here. So figure about another inch or so for the alternator bracket hanging out there. You see it's about 1 inch right there, so we'll add about 1 inch onto that to here. So you're looking at about 20 inches across. So that's 20 inches by 23 inches, and then it was 32 for the transmission. So what are some other important things that you might need to or want to know? Maybe the oil pickup here inside of this pan is right about this middle of this hump here. You can modify the the Mercury oil pickup is just typical steel pickup, so you can cut and move that back if you wish. If you want to do some serious street racing or something, or not street racing because that's illegal, but whatever. So for normal, typical street use, like I'm looking to do with this motor, I should be fine. Some other things. This motor is from an automatic Zetec. So you're gonna need to get the magnetic pickup for the timer is in the flywheel. There's holes cut in the back of the flywheel. So take a look here at the manual transmission. The automatic transmission flywheel. You could see the missing tooth there, and typical Ford setup. So in here, the manual flywheel is deeper. So this sensor, it has a longer pickup. So that's one thing you need to pay attention to. The other thing when converting to a manual setup from an automatic motor is the starter motor is different. There's this tab here, this little tab right there comes out further from the starter. So you're going to need the manual starter for this particular bell housing. Obviously, if you're going a different route, this is just to give some hints and ideas. There is no intake manifold on here yet because I haven't quite figured out what I want to do, but you could see the ports are shiny and ported, and nothing huge, but better than it was, that's for sure. I guess we could take a look at see what kind of weight this thing is for a just motor. Alright, so we'll go ahead and get a weight of this motor. You can see here the scale's reading 0 pounds, and so you know there's no trickery. We're going to go ahead and jack it up. Scale's turning on. I'm going to go ahead and finish jacking it up. When I put down the thing here, you don't want to watch all this. Alright, so here the motor is jacked up. You can see it's just floating around. I'll be able to move it with just my pinky. There's nothing underneath, no swiveling type thing underneath. This is a dry motor. You can see here it's reading right about 403 pounds dry. If we take a quart of oil, which is, I don't know how well you can see that, but there's 5 quarts oil. You just squeeze it in here. Read about 413 pounds or so. Around 413 pounds for the motor, tranny, with exhaust, all accessories, no intake, but you figure maybe 10 pounds for an intake, but you can see the weight. Alright, so what are some of my last thoughts on this project? Was a pain in the butt. There's lots of little details that came and bit you in the butt. Actually had to use a lathe to build some of the parts. Some spacers, precision spacers and whatnot. Things like that. I definitely would recommend having lots of patience building something like this. And just keep going, you'll get there.